Well, welcome to R3 Group. It's exciting to jump in and rewind back to Sunday's message as we learn and grow together. This Sunday was the last of 4 sermons on this topic 2020, where we looked at our core values: worship free, live free, serve free. And this time it was being set free. Really what we were talking about is living in response to God. You see, it's one thing to hear the voice of God, to think that you might see Him at work in your life, or you might hear what He's saying to you in your prayer life. It's completely different to live a life of complete surrender to Him, to let go of everything and to say, God, you can have your way in my life. Now, what's interesting as we jump into Scripture is that we found out that in a world that's looking for freedom, that freedom is actually found in a commitment to Christ. Look at Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 with me. And it says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Now, as we look at Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, there's something interesting to note here that Paul points out. It's that doctrine precedes ethics. Our doctrine is all about what we believe, what we know to be true, how we understand Scripture. But he says that's not enough. Our doctrine moves us on to how we live, and that's our ethics, that's our actions. How is this going to change my life? In other words, it's not just about recognizing what God is saying, it's about responding to that call in our lives. What's going to be different? It's not enough. Doctrine is never taught just to be known as information. It's taught so that it will change the way that we live. And so we see 3 key concepts that we looked at on Sunday that bring us deeper into this truth, and I want to look at those together. So let's dive into those. First, he says, commit your lives. What does it look like to be a living sacrifice, to offer my body as a sacrifice, to daily choose to surrender my life to God in the way that I live and in the things that I do? Second, it's about committing your lifestyle. This is a statement about being transformed in your mind. And we looked at this statement: you will either be conformed or you will be transformed. This is all about who you follow. Will you follow the way of the world, or will you follow the way of Christ? The third point we looked at was commit to your living. This is about your will. In other words, nothing about this following Christ thing is forced on us. We have a choice. Joshua tells us, choose this day whom you will serve. And what we found out is that our natural wiring is to choose the wrong thing. Following Christ takes intentionality. Will you be intentional in your faith? Will you go against your natural sinful desires and choose to live willingly for Christ? Andrew Murray says that God is ready to assume full responsibility for the life that is totally yielded to Him. What does that life look like? What does it look like for you to be totally yielded, totally surrendered to God? I want you to take time as a group now to discuss that. What does a fully surrendered life look like? And where do you struggle the most? Is it in surrendering your body, your mind, or your will? Have the discussion as a group, and then we'll jump back in with Reflect.
When I say the word surrender, what image comes to mind? Maybe you see an army raising a white flag, giving up, surrendering to an opposing force. Or maybe you see an image, something like this: an MMA fighter giving a chokehold, and surrender is the guy who's about to be choked out. He has to tap out, and the message is clear: surrender or die. Surrender is a really strong word. According to Merriam-Webster, it means to give up fighting because you know you can't win, or to yield control. Surrender isn't really a word that makes us feel all light and happy inside. But Pastor Phil on Sunday challenged us with a new idea of freedom, this idea that freedom isn't about complacency, but is about commitment. And so in that view of freedom, he asked us what we struggle to surrender with the most. And even if it's true that we believe that freedom lies hand in hand with surrender, it doesn't make raising the white flag or tapping out any easier, does it? I wonder if we would benefit from a different perspective on the idea of surrender. See, if it's the military raising the white flag, then that means that we have to give up something that we believe is worth fighting for. And I don't know that that's what God is talking about here. If it's the MMA fighter being tapped out, then that means that we're the ones being choked out, and that means that God is the one choking us out, and I'm not sure that's theologically correct. So maybe a new picture, a different perspective on what it means to surrender. So I want you to picture a cliff, and you and I are hanging on it, and we're hanging for dear life. We can't see the bottom, we don't know what's beneath us, but we get the feeling that it's a long way down. And I don't know about you, but if heights are involved, I'm hanging on for dear life. I'm afraid of heights. Not so much heights, but of falling from high places. Even to the point where I get nervous watching my kids play at Falls Park because they could fall. So if heights are involved, I don't know about you, but I'm hanging on for dear life. Whatever comes near me, if it's a vine, a root, a branch, somebody giving me a hand, or just clinging to the rock face, I'm holding on for dear life. So if you can see that picture with me, then I want you to stop right there and ask yourself, or picture with me, where do you think God is in this scenario? Some of you may say, well, God's hanging on to the rock with us, giving us encouragement and making sure that we can hold on together through the end. Or maybe you say, no, God's on top of the cliff. He's reaching his hand out. He's trying to help me up to get on with the direction that we're going. You know where I'd like us to see him for tonight, though? I think he's below us. I think he's below us, ready to catch us. As a matter of fact, I think he's asking for us to let go of what we're holding on to and to surrender and to trust fall into his arms. See, I think that this picture of surrender maybe is a bit more about what we're talking about here tonight, in falling into God's arms, in trusting that he's beneath us and has a plan for us. See, if what we believe about God is true, that he sees what we don't see and that he has a plan for our life that's bigger than we could ever imagine, well, then we should trust him to do what he says he's going to do. And I don't know about you, but in that midst of that death-defying situation, we're holding on to dear life. But that leaves me with the question that if God is below me, asking me to surrender and trust him and fall into his arms, then what am I holding on to? What are those things that I cling to so desperately? Things that I think are saving me, things that I think are keeping me alive, things that are enabling me to live my life to the fullest, when really God is below me and he promises me the fullness of life. Maybe we cling to our pride, this idea that I can pull myself up by my bootstraps, that all I need is a leg up and I can get on with life. Maybe we're clinging to a sinful habit or something that medicates the pain, whether it's a sexual sin or gravitating towards the root of bitterness or greed or envy, and we hang on to these things for dear life, thinking that they save us, thinking that by some way they give us an ability to control the situation around us, all the while God is below us, asking us to surrender, asking us to let go, asking us to trust him. I wonder if that's the picture of surrender that we can talk about tonight. And if it is, then the appropriate question is, what are you holding on to? What is God asking you to let go? What do you need to surrender in order to fall into his arms?